Long ago, deep inside the thick forests of Nigeria, there was a small village. All the people living in this village were farmers and hunters. They grew crops like yams, maize, and vegetables on their farms. The men also went hunting in the forest to get bush meat to eat. Right in the middle of this village, there stood a very big and very old tree. This tree was so massive that even 10 grown men holding hands could not reach around its huge trunk. The branches of this great tree spread out very wide, providing a large shaded area underneath. On hot days, the village people would come and rest under the cool shade of this tree. Now this special big tree could talk and speak. It had been alive for hundreds and hundreds of years. The tree was sage from living so long. All the villagers knew the big tree could talk, but they respected it like a respected elder in their community. They never disturbed or bothered the tree unless it was for an important reason. One day, there was a young boy named Ikin living in the village. He helped his family by working on their farm. Ikin and the other children had to wake up very early each morning to start their farm work before the hot sun came up. They worked very hard all day doing chores like planting seeds, pulling weeds, scaring away birds that tried to eat the crops, and collecting firewood to bring back home. By the evening time, Ikin was always dirty, tired, and sweating from being out in the fields all day long. On this particular day, it was very late in the evening when Ikin finished working on his family's yam farm. He was slowly walking home alone, exhausted from the day's labor under the scorching sun. As Ikin walked past the huge old tree in the village center, he suddenly heard a very deep, rumbling voice calling out to him saying, "Hey young one! Come rest under my cool shade for a while." Ikin stopped suddenly, looking around in surprise. He had heard the voice, but there was nobody else around. The voice continued, "I am the great tree. Sit under my branches and I shall provide you some relief from the hot Sunday." Ikin's eyes went wide with amazement as he realized it was the giant tree that was talking to him. He had heard the stories from the village elders about the tree being able to speak. But Ikin had never actually seen or heard it for himself before. After the initial shock wore off, Ikin smiled and respectfully replied, "Thank you, great tree, for your kind offer." He then walked over and sat down under the tree's large, shady branches, resting his small body against the huge trunk. "You work very hard on the farm each day at such a young age," rumbled the tree in its deep voice. "But it is important you do not overexert yourself in this hot Sunday." Ikin nodded, already feeling much cooler in the shaded area. He looked up in awe at the tree's massive branches reaching high into the sky above him. "Great tree, you have lived for so many, many years in this village," said Ikin. "You must have seen and learned so much over such a long time." The tree seemed to smile as it spoke, "Why yes, young Ikin, I have witnessed many things over my lifetime, longer than anyone can imagine. I have seen your grandparents and great-grandparents playing in these fields when they were children." Ikin's eyes went wide with curiosity. "Can you tell me some of the stories from those ancient times? I would be honored to learn from your great wisdom and experience, O wise tree." And so the ancient, talking tree began narrating folklore and incredible tales dating back over 100 years ago when Ikin's ancestors first settled in this village. In its deep rumbling voice, the tree spoke of an era without any modern tools or technology as we know it today. However, the people were self-sufficient, living off the land, and highly skilled in ancient practices that have been forgotten over time. The great tree spoke of legendary hunters who could track buffalo and elephants for weeks across the vast forests without getting lost. It described elaborate ceremonies and celebrations full of vibrant colors, dancing, singing, and feasting that would go on for many nights. It narrated stories of great bravery from village warriors who defended against attacks from hostile tribes, and tales of tragedy when disease or famine struck the villages periodically. Ikeen was completely captivated by listening to these ancient stories and folklore that he had never heard before. The tree was like a living history book from times dating so far back. Ikeen learned so much about the customs, beliefs, and heritage of his people that the modern generation had lost touch with. Before he realized it, the sun had set while Ikeen sat engrossed in the tree's legendary tales from the past. He suddenly heard his mother's voice calling out for him to come home for the night. The great tree stopped narrating and said in its deep voice, "You should return home now, young one, before your family starts worrying about you. But please feel free to come sit with me again if you wish to hear more of my stories from ancient times." From that day onwards, Ikeen visited the great talking tree as often as he could after finishing his daily farm chores. Sometimes he came alone, other times he brought along friends eager to listen to the tree's tales as well. Word slowly spread among all the children in the village about the ancient tree that could narrate engaging stories from the past. Very soon, a small crowd of kids would gather under the tree's massive branches every evening to hear its folklore. The great tree seemed to happily oblige its young audience, taking them on amazing journeys through time by narrating tales of events from decades and centuries ago when their ancestors lived very different lives. As the years went by, Ikeen continued visiting the great talking tree regularly along with his friends who were now teenagers as well. They would sit for hours in the shade of the massive branches, completely engrossed in the amazing folklore and ancestral tales narrated by the ancient tree. Through these legendary stories from the past, the youngsters learned so much about the rich traditions, cultural ceremonies, and ancient way of life that their own parents and grandparents had long forgotten over time. The tree's deep, wise voice transported them to an era over 100 years ago when their ancestors lived as hunters, gatherers, and skilled artisans without any of the modern tools or amenities that are common today. They heard tales of elaborate festivals full of vibrant colors, traditional dances, intricate crafts, and grand feasting that would go on for many nights. The tree narrated the old folklore describing ceremonies held for annual harvests, marriages, warrior initiations, and honoring elders who had passed away. Slowly but surely, the village teenagers started weaving the ancient stories and heritage they learned from the tree into poetry, songs, and art of their own. The oral traditions came alive again after lying dormant for generations. When Ikeen and his friends, who were now young adults, began sharing these revived customs and folklore with their parents and elders, it stirred something deep within them. The villagers suddenly realized how disconnected they had become from their ancestral roots and long-forgotten history. Inspired by the youth's passion for celebrating their rediscovered heritage, the village collectively decided to restart the old cultural festivals and ceremonies that had slowly faded away over decades of external influences. There was a vibrant atmosphere of rejuvenation in the community. The harvest festivals were celebrated again with traditional music, dance, colorful handmade costumes, and crafts just as the tree described from ages ago. Ikeen and the others played a central role in organizing the rituals and ensuring the ancient customs were brought back accurately based on the tree's guidance. The entire village came alive during these joyous occasions honoring their ancestors. Children learned dances from their grandparents who remembered fragments from their own youth. Artisans once again started crafting intricate masks, jewelry, and attire for ceremonial uses. The grand old tree seemed to beam with happiness and pride watching these ancient cultural traditions being revived in the village, once again after so many years. Its massive trunk was decorated with colorful inscriptions and garlands during the biggest festivals. However, soon a time of great strife and struggle came over the prosperous village when a terrible drought struck that region for many years, with hardly any rainfall at all. The crops completely failed season after season without water. Hunger and starvation became widespread as the community tried to survive on any wild plants, berries, or small animals they could find in the forest. But these meager food sources were quickly depleted too as the drought dragged on relentlessly. After 2 years of the famine, Ikeen, who was now an adult man, came to the great tree looking very frail and weak from lack of proper food. His cheeks were sunken and his clothes hung loosely over his thin frame. "Old friend, our people are in desperate times," said Ikeen feebly. "The drought has destroyed all our food sources and starvation looms over us now. Even our rivers and streams have gone dry with no rain for years. I fear many may not survive if help does not come." The ancient tree seemed to ponder deeply for several minutes, its branches gently swaying despite the still air around them. Finally, it spoke to Ikeen in its trademark deep rumble. "Do not lose hope just yet, my child. I have witnessed many great hardships over my centuries on this earth, yet your ancestors found a way to persevere each time. You too shall overcome this famine if you follow my guidance closely." The tree then gave specific instructions to Ikeen about going to the eastern side of its massive trunk and locating some of the above-ground roots. By following those roots deeper into the forest for about 2 miles, Ikeen would find a freshwater spring still flowing despite the drought. With renewed vigor, Ikeen did exactly as the wise tree had guided. After trekking for a while, he finally found the small spring silently trickling out from under the earth. Ikeen drank the cool, refreshing water to quench his thirst before rushing back to tell the villagers about this lifeline. The very next day, Ikeen led a group of men carrying large containers and gourds to the hidden spring location shown by the tree. Over the next few weeks, they made regular trips to bring back the fresh water which saved them from dehydration. Thanks to the tree's ancient knowledge of the land and forests, the village community managed to survive the remaining months until the rains finally returned to quench the drought. The people were eternally grateful to the grand old tree for averting disaster and potential loss of lives during this calamity. They renewed their reverence for the ancient tree as a guardian spirit watching over them in times of great need. From then on, the tree was unanimously regarded by the villagers as an elder of paramount wisdom. All major decisions impacting the community were first discussed with the tree, whose counsel was respected without question. The elders made it a tradition to decorate the tree's massive trunk during annual festivals using colors, flowers, and symbols holding deep significance about their ancestry and heritage. The grand old tree seemed to bask in the vibrance during these joyous occasions. And so life continued for many more generations in the little village hidden deep inside the forests of Nigeria. The people thrived while upholding their revived culture and traditions thanks to the invaluable guidance from their beloved talking tree. The great tree had become an inseparable part of the village's cultural fabric and community life. Its wise teachings from ancestral tales have helped the people reconnect deeply with their long-forgotten roots and traditions over the years. During festivals and ceremonies, the villagers joyfully decorated the tree's massive trunk with colorful decorations, flower garlands, and meaningful symbols representing their heritage. The ancient tree seemed to bask in this celebratory atmosphere created to honor it. Whenever the village elders had to make a major decision about matters impacting the whole community, they first sought the counsel of their wise talking tree. Its advice, passed down from centuries of experience, was respected and implemented without question. The tree's very existence as a living relic from ancient times was a great source of pride and wonder for the people. Parents brought their newborn babies to the tree's trunk and introduced them, saying, "This is our great ancient elder who will guide you through lifetimes of wisdom." When villagers passed away after living a fulfilled life, their loved ones hung symbolic clothing or items around the tree's branches in their honor. The tree represented an unbroken lineage connecting their present reality to their ancestral origins. On this day, Ikeen was now a wrinkly old man whose youthful exuberance was just a memory. Using a carved wood cane for support, he slowly made his way to the very center of the village where the colossal tree stood majestically. As Ikeen approached the tree's trunk, he affectionately ran his bony hand along the grooved bark which had grown even more knotted and thick over the passing decades. "Hello, my oldest friend," said Ikeen in a creaky voice. "It has been too long since I've come to visit you. My aged bones don't let me walk very far anymore from home these days." A deep rumbling chuckle emerged from the tree's upper branches in response. "Peace be upon you, Ikeen," the ancient tree spoke. "Your visits may be fewer these days, but you will always be welcomed like a dearest member of my family. Come, rest your body under my cool shade like you used to as a young boy." With a warm smile spreading across the wrinkles on his face, Ikeen slowly lowered himself down cross-legged on the ground, leaning against the tree's sturdy trunk. As early evening descended, the elderly Ikeen noticed a small group of children making their way across the village grounds in his direction. Most were young boys and girls, but a few looked barely older than toddlers being chaperoned by older siblings. Ikeen's eyes twinkled as nostalgia washed over him watching the kids heading towards the great tree. Many years ago, it was he who would excitedly lead his friends to this very same spot to listen to the ancient folklore, spoken directly by the talking tree. The children greeted Ikeen with big smiles as soon as they arrived under the tree's massive branches. "Hello, Grandpa Ikeen. We came to listen to the stories from the great tree," exclaimed one young boy eagerly. The old man chuckled heartily as the kids plopped down crisscrossed on the ground in front of him, their bright eyes full of anticipation. Ikeen first turned respectfully to the tree and asked, "My friend, would you allow me the honor to narrate one of your legendary tales to these young ones?" "But of course," rumbled the tree's voice through its swaying branches, "it would make me very happy for you to pass on my stories to this new generation, just as I have done with you and the elders before them." And so Ikeen began narrating an epic tale from the tree archives about the heroic warrior Princess Olota, who lived over 300 years ago. He vividly painted a picture for the kids of her incredible journey tracking a rogue lion for weeks while pregnant. With animated expressions, Ikeen brought to life the legend of how Princess Olota finally slew the lion single-handedly and across its body went into labor, delivering a healthy baby boy in the middle of the dense jungle. The story exemplified the resilience and strength of spirit in the tribe's ancestry. The gaggle of village children sat completely entranced listening to the gripping narration from wise old Ikeen. It was as if his words transported them all back through the mists of time to experience that legendary moment, unfolding in front of their eyes. Just as the tree had done for him many decades ago, Ikeen saw that the folktales and fantasy stories were firing up the young kids' imaginations and instilling great cultural pride in them about their village heritage. When the story came to its epic climax, the brave princess, children burst into loud cheers and clapping. Several of the smaller kids excitedly raised their hands, eager for Ikin to narrate another tale from the past. The elderly man chuckled as he shifted his frail body to get more comfortable against the tree trunk behind him. He was overjoyed that these new stories kindled the same sense of curiosity and passion in today's generation, as it did for him in his youth. Just then, the tree's deep voice rumbled quietly near Ikin, saying, "You honor me greatly by keeping my ancestral tales alive in these youngsters' hearts, just as they live on in yours." In that moment, Ikin realized his full-circle journey from being a young boy captivated by the tree's narrations, to now being the elder passing those very same lessons down to the new generation. And he smiled contentedly, knowing that the great tree's eternal wisdom and mythology would continue being passed down orally, for centuries more, as a cherished heirloom celebrating their people's heritage. Gathering the kids' rapt attention once again with a clap, Ikin cleared his throat and prepared to narrate yet another riveting tale about their ancestral gods and heroes. Some details and names may become distorted over time, Ikin thought to himself. But the life lessons and cultural essence carried in these stories from the ancient talking tree will continue bonding his village community for generations to come.